visited the roundabout both on bicycle, and I walked it by foot and drove through it. And I did so likewise on May 27th and several days in between. Other than conversations with staff and those site visits, I have no other ex parte. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you could lower your hand, both of you, thank you very much. Your hand raised. Yes, I visited the site several times in this last week, and I visited the night lighting of Olive Mill, of Hot Springs, about 10 last night. And I also spoke to the applicant 1 or 2 times. And that's my ex parte and site visits. Commissioner Kupiak, please.
I had a brief conversation with Chris Snedden regarding the lighting issues and the language that was in our modifications.
Great. Appreciate. Okay, if we could please go to have standard agenda number 1 read into the record.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of the County Public Works to consider case numbers 19 DVP 30 and 19 CDP 98 applications filed on July 11, 2019, and to accept the addendum dated March 2020 to the Environmental Impact Report prepared for the Caltrans Highway 101 HOV project, including the EIR dated August 26, 2014, revised EIR dated October 27, 2017, and EIR addendum dated June 1st, 2018, pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you very much. And staff presentation, please.
Madam Chair, point of information.
Please.
Could I inquire as to how the chair intends to proceed with respect to this matter today? My understanding is that the scope of today's meeting is limited to determine whether the additional conditions of approval the 4 commissioners approved at our last meeting have been drafted and reflect their motion. Is that the chair's intention and the scope of today's proceeding?
The chair will proceed with staff presentation. I'm going to ask if the applicant has, I believe they do not have presentation, but as far as a courtesy, if they want to basically amplify or clarify anything, and then I will have public comment. And the question before us, what is before us, is exactly what was voted last time. We are here to review the conditions and to have deliberations along with questions and then deliberations, which is, I believe, basically what you are recommending that we basically abide by.
Madam Chair, is it the chair's intention to reopen the record on this matter?
It depends on the manner in which this proceeds. It could depend on questioning that the record would be open.
Well, I would only point out, as I did at our last meeting, under our procedures adopted on March 12th, that the public hearing has been closed, was closed some time ago, that we are at stage 12, where we're considering the form of approval, and that opening the record, I do not believe would be appropriate.
Council?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, typically when an item is continued, if there is new information being presented by staff and it's a separately agendized item at a new hearing, we typically do recommend that the Commission call for public comment to address the new information that's been added to the record. Chairs and the Commission's discretion to put reasonable time restrictions on that public comment and to request that answers focus on the new information.
Thank you very much. Going forward.
I have my hand up.
I'm sorry. Yes, we have 2 hands up. Yes, Commissioner Keller.
It was not my understanding that this meeting was going to be restricted to a discussion of conditions. The matter before us is approval, denial, or approval with conditions of a CDP. And as far as I am concerned, that entire matter should be open. And in fact, I do have additional information that I would like to include in the record today.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. Commissioner Kupiak.
I will defer to the others who are deciding whether to open this or not. I mean, I'm content to go over the.
All right. Please, could you lower your hands? The hand raise, please. That's very, very helpful to manage this. Thank you. Going forward, if we can have the staff presentation, please.
Good morning, Chair Senauer and members of the Commission. The presentation will begin in just a moment. Thank you. On May 20th, your Commission continued the project to today's hearing with direction to return with modifications to the conditions of approval to accomplish a number of goals as discussed on the next slide. We were directed to provide conditions that ensure that the landscape design is fire safe, water saving, does not use chemical herbicides, and is maintained for the long term. To provide a condition that requires that the overall design is semi-rural, minimizes lighting, protects views, uses rural signage, and includes decomposed granite pathway. That utility poles be undergrounded, that there be limitations placed on noise impacts, that we ensure construction of a four-way stop at the South San Ysidro intersection, and that the Caltrans bridge railing be replaced. In response to your Commission's request, staff prepared both new and modified conditions of approval with consideration given to ensuring that the measures be enforceable and measurable. And I'll begin review of the proposed conditions on the next slide, please.
Thank you.
We prepared a landscape design and maintenance condition. This is a new condition, and this condition prohibits the use of glyphosate and other chemical herbicides. It requires the landscape plan be approved by the Montecito Fire District and prohibits plant materials from the fire district's undesirable plant list. It requires the use of water-saving irrigation, such as drip irrigation, the use of recycled water if feasible, and requires a 5-year establishment period and maintenance for the life of the project. Next slide, please. The other new condition that we recommend is a final design condition. This condition, as currently written, requires that dimmers be installed on the lights, and it limits light levels to an average of 1.5 foot candles or a maximum of 7, consistent with, or I should say, and a maximum of 7, consistent with IES and Caltrans standards. It requires that the center median design maintain ocean and mountain views while maintaining the semi-rural character. That road designation signs be wooden signs with white lettering and a brown background. That DG be used for pedestrian pathways where feasible, and that utility poles be undergrounded. We also recommended changes to some of the existing conditions, starting on the next slide, please. The first condition we recommended changes to is the noise condition. For this one, we recommended the construction hours be restricted to 7 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with limited exceptions when required to avoid major traffic disruption in instances where there's the need for full intersection closure. We required that notice be given in the local media and in letters to nearby residents, with the, including estimated dates of construction and noting potential noise impact. We also added language that provides for designated staff to receive complaints, and that upon receipt of the complaint, noise producing activity may be changed, altered, or temporarily suspended. The tree maintenance condition was modified to increase the establishment period to 5 years, and that's consistent with changes that we added to the landscape condition. Next slide, please. There were a few changes that we didn't recommend. Those include changes to add a four-way stop at the South San Ysidro intersection. And the reason that we didn't recommend that is because it's already required by policy 7-32, and also because Public Works has already submitted an application to Caltrans for this four-way stop, and they intend to complete it within 6 to 12 months, if not earlier. And then finally, we recommended against adding it to the project description portion because if it were added to the project description portion of the roundabout, it would then be held up by the condition clearance process, which would mean it would actually end up getting installed later. The second item that we didn't recommend that the commission asked about was to replace the bridge railing, the Caltrans bridge railing, and we didn't recommend this because Public Works does not have jurisdiction or right of way over the bridge. And we also wanted to note that this bridge will come before your commission along with the Caltrans Highway 101 segment improvements, and your commission will have the opportunity to make recommendations regarding the bridge at that time. So in summary, on the next slide, please, staff's recommendation is that you make the required findings for approval of the project, including CEQA findings as specified in the April staff report, that after considering the environmental review documents, determine that no subsequent EIR or negative declaration be prepared, and that you approve the project subject to the conditions of approval as specified in the April 2nd, 2020 staff report and as revised in the June 2nd, 2020 staff memo. And that will conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions from the commissioners to staff? I have two hands up. I think Commissioner Keller was first, please.
Yes, my questions are not so much of staff as returning to the process that we're engaged in. So I don't know at what point it would be appropriate for me to address those.
What process?
I'm talking about our approval of the conditional use permit.
Right,
and
before us. We
Yeah.
have not addressed that yet. That is before this commission as a decision body.
Right. So should my comments about that be delayed until deliberation?
Yeah.
And staff comments now?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Then I do have two requests of staff because your summary does not exactly correspond with the conditions as presented. As presented, the conditions say that you have talked about the use of decomposed granite for pedestrian paths where feasible. And that was a concern that I had raised. And what is the extent feasible